As Libyan rebels take control of Gaddafi's compound in Tripoli, and British Deputy Prime Minister Clegg declares the Libyan leader's 4-decade reign to be near its end, it's time to reflect on the West's latest imperial adventure, the military takeover of a sovereign country which has violated several UN Security Council resolutions. Under the pretext of protecting civilians, the military wing of the Anglo-American establishment, NATO, has actually killed numerous innocent Libyans, as well as damaging the infrastructure of a stable, prosperous country.
Libyan state media said on Tuesday dozens of civilians had been killed in a NATO strike on a village about 90 miles east of Tripoli. NATO says it's looking into the reports. Libyan state television showed the charred bodies of at least 3 young children and said they were killed by a NATO strike on Monday night on the village of Marja. It also showed wounded women and children being treated in a hospital. The television station reported that a total of 85 people had been killed in Marja, but it did not say how many of these were civilians. The official Jana news agency said 20 families had been killed, without giving a more precise figure. This number was also cited by a man interviewed on Libya TV who said he had lost his daughter.
My 2-year-old daughter and entire families are here from other areas. They came all the way here to escape the bombings from the airstrikes. 20 families are dead, children and women, all of them innocent people.
The casualty reports have not been independently verified.
The aims of Western intervention in Libya changed as the war progressed. Initially we were told NATO had been employed to prevent a massacre in the rebel-held city of Benghazi, a massacre which never occurred, but a pretext which paved the way for an all-out air assault on the country. Bombing civilians to protect them constitutes a truly twisted example of Orwellian doublethink. The Anglo-American establishment has acted with reckless impunity, and as Denis Kucinich notes, their attack on Libya has moved the world community from the rule of law to the rule of force and set a precedent for NATO to become the new global cop. Civilian casualty figures are hard to establish, with some estimates putting the number of dead at over 15,000. The number of innocent victims is likely to increase as battles rage between rebels and pro-Gaddafi forces in urban Tripoli. Human deaths are of course the most appalling consequence of the attack on Libya, but we must also consider the financial cost of the war. At a time when Britain and the US are facing economic meltdown, social welfare programs and public services are being slashed across the board, and the cost of living is spiraling ever higher, taxpayers have been forced to contribute obscene amounts of money to fund the war in Libya.
The U.S. military has already spent hundreds of millions of dollars more than the Pentagon's estimations. A Pentagon memo has put the cost of the U.S. operations until mid-May at around $700 million. The U.S. has about 75 aircraft, including drones, involved in the operations against forces loyal to Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi. The pace of spending is higher than reported by the U.S. Defense Department in late March. Pentagon officials told a congressional hearing that the U.S. had spent about $550 million in Libya at a rate of about $40 million a month.
But at the same time, this is going well beyond the sort of protection of civilians that was the original mandate of the NATO force, and they've now got over 4,000 sorties flown since the air war began. So I think this is, we've never seen anything quite like this. I don't know that the American public will stand behind this or not.
And now that figure has risen to 60 million.
The official war costs stated by the Pentagon, presumably an underestimation, are a staggering $900 million. The official figure given in June for the UK was over £200 million, though some estimates have claimed the cost could rise to as much as £1 billion. At a time when the British and American people struggle to make ends meet during a global financial depression. Whilst the goals of the intervention shifted from preventing a massacre to toppling the Gaddafi regime, the real reasons for the war have been blindingly obvious to those with the most rudimentary knowledge of geopolitics, namely to capture Libya's natural resources, such as its massive reserves of oil and gold. Libya's oil reserves are the largest in Africa and the 9th largest in the world, at an estimated 42 billion barrels, and the country has declared gold reserves worth more than $6 billion.
I think that what is at stake here is something far more fundamental, which nobody is really mentioning, at least in the media. This is part of the battle for oil. Libya has 3.5% of global oil reserves, twice those of the United States. It's one of the major oil producers. It supplies large amounts of oil to the European Union. Its National Oil Corporation is among the 25 largest oil companies in the world. And what is involved here is the battle for oil.
The manner in which the West has turned on Gaddafi is particularly striking, given the recent reconciliation that took place between the Libyan leader and the West in recent years. In 2003, Libya voluntarily abandoned its nuclear weapon-making capability and then opened up its country to international investment, privatizing many of its state-owned companies. Who can forget Tony Blair's infamous handshake in a tent in the Libyan desert, when in 2004 he welcomed Gaddafi as a partner in the war on terror, in order to secure deals between British oil companies and the Libyan regime. Unfortunately for the West, Gaddafi proved to be an awkward business partner, soon demanding a higher price for Libyan oil and a majority share of the revenues. It became clear to the Western establishment that he had to be removed, and the rebel uprising in Libya earlier in the year proved an opportune excuse to do so. The purported goal of NATO's initial intervention rapidly morphed into a campaign to oust Gaddafi and his regime. To justify this illegal attempt at toppling Gaddafi, the Libyan leader's alleged crimes against the West have been frequently highlighted by our political leaders and repeated in the mainstream media. The murder of PC Yvonne Fletcher, gunned down outside the Libyan embassy in London in 1984, has been invoked in an attempt to demonize the Libyan regime, even though there is a convincing alternative narrative implicating Western intelligence and not Libyan diplomats in PC Fletcher's murder.
On Dispatches this week and next, back on the trail of one of the most important investigations the programme has mounted. Dramatic new evidence on the killing of policewoman Yvonne Fletcher in London's St James's Square. Tonight, how the official version of the events behind her murder cannot be true. How she cannot have been shot from the Libyan embassy. But if not, then how? In a major two-part investigation, Dispatches reporter Joe Laban pieces together the full sinister truth behind her death. He will meet the man who knows just why she was killed, and the man who brought the gun into this country. And he will ask exactly who was in the know. That's Dispatches, on the disturbing evidence we must confront in Murder in St James's.
The Lockerbie bombing, which in recent weeks has been confidently asserted as personally ordered by Gaddafi, is cited by Barack Obama and William Hague as another reason for why he should be removed from power. This is despite the existence of very strong evidence suggesting the innocence of the man convicted of the bombing, Abdel Batter al-Megrahi, and the possibility that Libya might not have had any involvement in the outrage at all. Some researchers convincingly allege it was actually carried out by Palestinian-based terrorists under the orders of Iran, in revenge for the accidental blasting out of the sky of an Iranian passenger jet by a US warship in 1988.
This is a blast that a British explosives expert believes blows a hole in the conviction of the so-called Lockerbie bomber.
I do find it quite extraordinary, and I think highly improbable, most unlikely that you would ever find a fragment like that. I mean, it is unbelievable.
There were 20 of these test explosions. Their conclusions will only intensify the controversy over who really bombed Pan Am 103.
I resent intensely the fact that I believe that I am now witness to a ragbag of lies and misconceptions surrounding this trial.
It's, if you like, material that comes at second hand, perhaps at third hand, through various sources.
At the start, the Americans had done their own tests to find where on the plane the bomb was placed. At that point, terrorists run from Syria with the suspects, and the theory, the bomb had been loaded at Heathrow. Many, most critical of the trial, say that's still the most plausible scenario.
The explosion occurred exactly when it would have occurred 38 minutes after takeoff if one of the Syrian devices had been used.
Flora Swire was 23 when she died on Pan Am 103. Her father says he's still waiting for justice.
At the beginning of the trial, I thought I was going to watch the conviction of 2 of the murderers of my daughter. By the end of it, I was satisfied that they were not involved. And although I'm sure the truth will come out at, say, 50 years, I want to know in my lifetime, I want this exposed for what I believe it to be.
George Bush Jr., during a phone call with Gaddafi in late 2008, even expressed his satisfaction that Libya has settled a long-standing dispute over terrorist attacks, including the bombing of a Pan Am jet over Scotland. Such inconvenient facts disappeared down the memory hole as the Anglo-American war machine sought justifications for its flagrant violation of international law in its determination to oust Gaddafi to gain control of Libya's lucrative resources. Western propaganda continued with the absurd and totally unsubstantiated claim that Gaddafi was personally providing his troops with Viagra to help them rape rebel women as a weapon of war. Despite Hillary Clinton and the International Criminal Court endorsing the Viagra rape story, the claims were quickly dismissed by human rights groups such as Amnesty International. The West has even been working with Islamic extremists in its war on Gaddafi, not, it's alleged, for the first time. In 1998, former MI5 spy David Shayler claimed that 2 years earlier, a group with links to Al-Qaeda had been paid £100,000 by the British government to assassinate Gaddafi.
So we're talking about something like about £100,000 to fund the assassination attempt against Gaddafi, which of course all comes from the British taxpayer.
Britain's agent Tunworth was a part of the conspiracy. He became SIS's link with the militant Islamic group, a hardline organisation headed by Abdullah as-Sadiq. In the past, several Arab countries have said that Britain is harbouring Islamic militants. With its large Middle Eastern community, London has become an alternative political capital for the Arab world. Libya has publicly accused Britain of giving refuge to the leader of the militant Islamic group. In response to our inquiries, the Foreign Office remarkably says it doesn't know if Abdullah as-Sadiq is in this country. Late in February 1996, the militant Islamic group went into action. They'd learned that Colonel Gaddafi's car was going to pass on a road near the city of Sirte. The terrorists had put a bomb under the road and waited. They set it off. Several bodyguards are thought to have died. In the gun battle which followed, 3 members of the militant Islamic group were also reportedly killed. Shortly after the attack failed, intelligence reports were received and sent back to London, where they ended up on David Shayler's desk.
In 1996, saying that an attempt had been made on Gaddafi's life, that in fact a bomb had been put under a car in a cavalcade. Gaddafi was travelling in the cavalcade but in a different car, so the explosion had gone off and there had been various casualties, fatalities, but in fact they'd got the wrong people. Now even then I was still thinking, well, this could be a result of the Islamic extremist activity going on in Libya in general. I mean, there was another intelligence report which wasn't quite as detailed, but this again was supporting the fact that the thing had happened.
A few days later, at the offices of an Arabic newspaper in London, a fax arrived at the desk of Camille Tawil. In it, the militant Islamic group claimed responsibility for the attack. They also identified the members of its team who they said had been martyred in the bid to kill Gaddafi.
During the recent Libyan uprising, extremists with links to Al-Qaeda have been fighting amongst the rebels. Whilst for the last decade the West has been waging a war on terror, using the threat of Al-Qaeda to invade countries such as Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as an excuse to clamp down on domestic civil liberties, our leaders have been more than happy to turn a blind eye to the alleged existence of terrorists within the Libyan rebel army. Covert on-the-ground British assistance, officially denied, has been provided to the rebels since the early stages of the uprising. Indeed, some speculate that the uprising itself was planned and fomented by Western governments. It's been established definitively that a British SAS team, accompanied by an MI6 officer, were on the ground in very early March, a mission that resulted in humiliation after the troops were detained by rebels, shortly followed by a diplomat's plea for their release being unwittingly broadcast on state television.
We have been planning to send some officials to stay in Benghazi to liaise with you, with the National Council, but also to keep an eye on the humanitarian situation and see whether there is any medicines or food or things that we can provide for the future to help the people. And we sent today, ahead of those officials who were coming, we sent a small group just to find if there was a hotel, if everything was working and there was somewhere they could stay and work when we get our group organized. And I understand that they have, there has been a misunderstanding and they have been picked up by the security group who are concerned about their presence and who they are. And I hope to ask Mr. Jalil if he might be able to intervene to help us clear up this misunderstanding, if there's anything we can do to help explain who they are and what they were doing, that they're just trying to prepare for our mission which we would like to send out.
Actually, I started that already. I talked to Mr. Al-Jalil and about those people, and we contacted Benghazi, how they are and where they find them. Actually, they made a big mistake with coming with a helicopter, I think, in an open area. So I don't know.
Did they? I didn't know how they were coming.
Yeah, with a helicopter in an open area, so the people they note that there's some people coming down, and they
I'm not surprised. That alarmed them.
They talk them to and there's an investigation now going.
But help is on hand. Evidence for the first time of Allied boots on the ground. Here, a group of armed foreigners, possibly British, seen liaising with the fighters. It could be to facilitate forthcoming helicopter attacks. The men left hurriedly when they spotted us.
SAS personnel have played a critical role in advising and guiding the rebels throughout the war, culminating in their planning, alongside French, Qatari and Jordanian special forces, of the recent swoop into Tripoli. With SAS teams on the ground directing operations and NATO in the air running countless bombing campaigns against Gaddafi troops, the Libyan rebels have admitted that without such assistance, their uprising would have quickly failed. The war stands as a shocking example of Western military aggression. Controlled and directed by the Anglo-American establishment from its inception, it's made a mockery of international law, killed numerous civilians, cost taxpayers dearly during a time of economic hardship, and deposed the leader of a sovereign country who posed no threat to the West and who had even made attempts at reconciliation during recent years. Libya is now destabilized and much of its infrastructure has been damaged. We can only hope, considering the differing factions who make up the rebel army and the fact that Gaddafi and his loyalists have vowed to fight to the death, that the country does not now descend into brutal Iraqi-style civil war. As Denis Kucinich states, if NATO's top commanders are not held accountable in the International Criminal Court for civilian deaths in Libya, we have truly witnessed the triumph of a new international gangsterism.